Welcome to the Ain't the Beer Cold podcast, sports talk with a Baltimore bias. My name is Brandon, and I am your host. Today, we will be talking about the Ravens' crushing loss to the Buffalo Bills. We'll be talking a lot about Lamar Jackson's legacy and what this means for Lamar Jackson. And we have a few notes at the end about the Ravens' offseason and a farewell to Anthony Santander. So let's get started with the Bills Ravens. Obviously, this was a crushing loss. The Mark Andrews drop heard around the world that everybody has kind of talked about and had plenty of thoughts about. But let's go through the whole game and let's kind of add some context to all that went down last night. So we've got uh, on the last podcast, I told you the Bills' keys to victory were that they needed to run the ball better. In the first game that the Bills played the Ravens, they ran the ball 16 times for 50 yards. The run game was absolutely ineffective, and it just let the Ravens pin their ears back and go after Josh Allen. Well, last night, the Bills ran the ball for 127 yards. They mixed in some James Allen, some Ray Davis. They even had Ty Johnson on some meaningful carries there. And they really did a good job of balancing the run game and the pass game. I think Josh Allen only had like 120 yards passing. I mean, they really had a nice, balanced, and conservative offensive approach. The other thing that I said is that the Bills really needed to get the lead because when you have the lead, it puts pressure on Lamar Jackson, and he can be accident prone at times. I'm going to spend a lot of time today defending Lamar Jackson, but I will say he does have a propensity for making mistakes when under pressure or when the Ravens are behind or when he feels like he needs to do too much. So I think the most important part for the Bills, they didn't take the lead right away. The Ravens went up 7-0, but the Bills answered back immediately. They made it 7-7. And when they did that, then Lamar throws the interception. I think that was just a bad play. I don't think that was Lamar doing too much. I think it was just a bad read. He talked about how he needed to look the safety off, but he didn't, and then he threw that ball down the right sideline, and it was just a bad pass, a bad play. Ravens defense answers, and the Ravens get the ball back at 7-7, and they start to drive. This is when the big mistake happens. And on this drive, what ends up happening is Lamar is tripped by one of his offensive linemen a couple plays into the drive. They get a big first down on a play to Anthony Miller. The next play throws to an open Mark Andrews who drops the ball. The following play, there's a bad snap. So Lamar's now been tripped, a drop pass, a bad snap. He's kind of the context here is that the team has really, started to make some mistakes around him. And I think that's why Lamar tried to press. And instead of just protecting the ball on this bad snap, Lamar tries to be Superman. He tries to make something happen. And we end up with a fumble and a return that eventually turns into a Bills touchdown. So this play really was the thing that kind of turned the momentum. Tucker gets a field goal after that, and the Bills go up 21-10 going into the half. So the first half belonged to the Buffalo Bills, and it really kind of swung on that error or that string of errors that really began with Lamar being tripped, Mark Andrews dropping a pass, a bad snap by the center, and culminated in the Lamar Jackson fumble. That story changed in the second half. The second half of this football game absolutely belonged to the Ravens. They looked like the Ravens that we've seen all year and the Ravens that we know that they can be. They come out. D gets a stop on the first drive. Bill's got the ball coming out first. D stops them. I think it was a 3-and-out. And then the Ravens go down. They get a field goal. Then they get a touchdown. They go for two to try to tie it up. It's 19-21. In the entire second half, the Ravens only allowed 6 points by the defense, and that included a really impressive uh, inside the five stop on Josh Allen, holding them to a field goal, keeping the game a one possession game. Lamar was spectacular in the second half, 12 of 15, 131 yards, a touchdown. Obviously, he hit Mark Andrews with the 2 point conversion that ended up getting dropped. But despite these efforts, it was the mistakes, mostly by Mark Andrews, who I love, who is a Ravens legend, the all time leading touchdown receiver for the Baltimore Ravens. He was fourth in the league this year in touchdown receptions. The only guys that had more touchdown receptions than Mark Andrews were Jamar Chase, Terry McLaurin, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. He was tied with Mike Evans. When you're talking about him in the same sentence as those guys, Mark Andrews is an absolute difference maker. There will be no Mark Andrews slander on this podcast, but he did let us down a little bit, and it's tough. We'll talk about this in a minute, but you kind of look for somebody to blame when your team loses, and I think many of us are so tired of hearing Lamar get blamed for it that I've heard people kind of lashing out at Mark Andrews. We're not going to lash out at Mark Andrews. He's got to wear this one, but at the same time, it was a team loss. All in all, the Ravens played a spectacular second half. In the entirety of the game, the Ravens never punted. The offense continued to move without any resistance, really. I mean, the offense couldn't really be stopped by Buffalo. It was just the two fumbles, the Lamar Jackson fumble in the first half and the Mark Andrews fumble in the second half, and that's what cost the Ravens the game. And it was a great game by the Ravens. Buffalo played a consistent, conservative game, threw for, like I said, they only threw for 120 yards, but they continued to run the ball. They made the plays they needed to make on defense. And, good luck to the Bills as they move forward and take on the Chiefs. And we'll see how that goes for them. So now we're at the point where we need to process another disappointing loss by the Ravens in the playoffs. And I think the best thing that can be said about this, John Harbaugh said it best. He said that people out there are going to look for some cosmic thread. Everybody wants to blame somebody. Lamar Jackson's not clutch. Lamar Jackson makes too many mistakes. He turns the ball over. It typically comes back to Lamar Jackson. The Ravens, maybe it's a Ravens issue. Maybe it's a John Harbaugh issue, which we won't get into that much today. But John Harbaugh has the most road victories of any coach in NFL history in the playoffs. He's got a Super Bowl championship. He is a gets the Ravens to the playoffs perennially. He's a winner. I love John Harbaugh. I actually think he's just a great person, great football family, great football guy. So there's not gonna be any John Harbaugh slander either. We're not coming out of this loss looking for people to hate. We're coming out of this loss and we're just processing. We're not trying to find somebody to put on the chopping block. It's not about, oh, we need to make changes. We need to hate on this person or hate on that person. We just got to process. And for me, part of that processing is drawing a clear delineation between the last 2 years and the first three playoffs for Lamar Jackson. So Lamar Jackson made it to the playoffs in his rookie season in 2018. Lost to the Chargers. 2019 was the loss to the Titans. 2020 was the loss to the Bills. What is important for us to realize is those three playoff losses, he was younger than Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix are right now. Lamar Jackson came into the league, was handed a football at 21 years old, and said, "Go out, not only win the playoff game. He had to go 6-1 as a starter just to get the Ravens into the playoffs in 2018 at 21. And then his age 22 and 23 seasons, he's got an MVP at age 22. Jaden Daniels, we're talking about Jaden Daniels winning Rookie of the Year this year, maybe being the best rookie of all time. Lamar Jackson already had an MVP award when he was Jaden Daniels' age. So I think you have to look at those first three playoff losses, and I'm not excusing them because of his youth, but I'm just saying he was way ahead of schedule. The fact that the Ravens were the one seed and that he had an MVP and still put up 500 yards in a game against the Titans in 2019, uh, he's just ahead of schedule. And he's leaps and bounds ahead of where, Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix were still playing college football at his age. So I think we have to process those first three playoff losses, and they kind of sit in their own element. But now we got to look at the last 2 years. You've got the loss to the Chiefs. Well, first of all, they're 2-2 in the last 2 years. So they've gone into the playoffs. They've played four really good football teams. They beat CJ Stroud and the Texans last year. They beat a Steelers team that beat them earlier in the year this year, and you know, people thought were really good. All of a sudden they got exposed at the end of the year, but that's not what we heard all season. The Steelers were great and all this kind of stuff. When the Steelers were 8-2, people were talking about how this was the best job Mike Tomlin's ever done and Russell Wilson's back and all this kind of stuff. I I don't want to go either way on that. The Steelers were a good football team. I'm not going to say they were total frauds. I'm not going to say they were as good as people thought they were when they were 8-2. They were a good football team. Last year, CJ Stroud was the 2023 version of what Jaden Daniels is this year. So they beat two really good football teams convincingly in the playoffs over the past 2 years. And then they lost to two great football teams. You're talking about Josh Allen, who people collectively, I mean, there's probably a 50-50 split here. The MVP voting is probably just as close as the football game was last night. One dropped 2-point conversion away from being a tie game. It's basically MVP voting is probably going to be very similar. So you're talking about Josh Allen, who's right on par with Lamar Jackson. Uh, and then you're talking about Patrick Mahomes, who's in the conversation as one of the greatest of all time. And if they three-peat this year and he gets his fourth ring, he's right up there with Brady in the same breath. So how are we going to sit here and, you know, just really give it to Lamar for not beating those two guys? I can't do it. Um, I think Lamar played spectacular, particularly in the second half last night. In 2023, he was let down by the Zay Flowers fumble, or they had a chance to tie that game. Last night, it was the Mark Andrews drop where they had a chance to tie it, and the Mark Andrews fumble on the previous possession where the Ravens were driving. They were already into Buffalo territory and had a chance to take the lead. He was let down by his teammates a little bit, and I'm not putting the whole thing on Lamar. So, along with processing this loss, there's also a degree to which it just feels like Ravens fans have this strong need and desire to defend Lamar Jackson, or at least I feel that way. And there's just a myriad of reasons for why that might be the case. Um, and when you look at Lamar's entire career, go all the way back to the draft, and he's continually been underestimated. He's continually been doubted. He's continually been treated unfairly, honestly. A Heisman Trophy winning quarterback being asked to play wide receiver. The scrutiny of what Lamar can do and has done and his greatness has just been absolutely unfairly criticized his entire career. And it honestly, it pisses me off. Like, I want to just get mad about it when I think about it. I want to and it's not just the fact that it's been unfair. I think when you talk about Lamar Jackson, he represents maybe a greater ideal than just himself. It's the fact that, maybe Lamar Jackson represents, whether it's race or equality or equity or just truth in general, that it just seems like injustice to criticize Lamar Jackson the way that he's been criticized. And I don't have the perfect terminology for this. It's like a frustrating argument that you just got to get out. It's like, I don't know how to say it right. I don't know how to be politically correct about this, but Lamar Jackson's blackness, Lamar Jackson's eh, who he is as a person, and even the way he is uh, don't know the right terminology here. Just the way he presents himself. He's a darker skinned, he's a more urban type black person. And I think the greatest comparison with him is to just look at like I was sitting here thinking a few minutes before I was doing this podcast, was like, who's the last black quarterback to win a Super Bowl? Patrick Mahomes didn't come to mind for a while. Like I was like, oh yeah, Patrick Mahomes. It's like, because in a sense, and I would never discredit somebody's race. I can't understand that myself. I can't ever experience it. All I can do is observe it. But the difference between a Patrick Mahomes and a Lamar Jackson is uh, the best I can say is it's like a modern day paper bag test. In the 50s in the Jim Crow era, you had a paper bag test about how black someone was. And I can't discredit Mahomes' blackness. Like that's awful. And I would never do that. I can't say that. But this frustration has to be worked out somehow. There is obviously a difference. There's a reason why Patrick Mahomes is endorses State Farm and Subway and T-Mobile, and Lamar Jackson endorses his own company called Play Action Soul Food. Like if there's a difference. Are they both black? Yeah. Is there a difference? Hell yeah, there's a difference. There's a huge fucking difference. How do you not like just from a pure I'm observing two different people and the way that they're treated by the media and the way that they're accepted. Could you ever see a Lamar Jackson, Brittany Mahomes, Travis Kelsey, and Taylor Swift group like coming to hang out? Like he would stand out like a sore thumb. It's different. And I don't know how to say it's different because I'm not black and I don't understand I don't understand it. I don't know how to say it, but it's different. Like anybody with eyeballs is like, oh, that's different. So when Lamar Jackson comes out in the draft, I'm like, oh, maybe he should play wide receiver. Or whenever he gets injured and they're like, oh, well, his style of play is unsustainable, even though he's played 5 out of his 7 seasons without missing a game. Like this is an unsustainable type of play. He's reckless. You can't run like that. Lamar Jackson has paved the way, has made it possible for the black quarterbacks like Jaden Daniels to come in and maybe not like maybe Jaden Daniels plays in the NFL. I'm not saying that. But for Jaden Daniels to come in and play the way he plays, for Jaden Daniels to come in and to run for 900 yards in his rookie season, how many NFL teams pre Lamar Jackson are letting their quarterback, franchise quarterback that they just spent a high draft pick on, run the ball for 900 yards? Nobody. They're going to tell that guy, "Hey, you need to conform to the typical NFL image of a starting quarterback." Lamar Jackson changed that narrative. This year is proof of that. 2024, there were 15 starting quarterbacks, black starting quarterbacks in the NFL in week 1. That's the most in NFL history. Lamar Jackson broke the paradigm. And there's something about the way that he's been treated. There's something about the inequality. There's something about the racism. There's something there that just makes me want it for him so bad that I could like cry talking about it. Like it's a fucked up world where people would not treat him the same because of his race. Like it's wrong. And I think that he represents the city of Baltimore well, just because of their diversity and being one of the blackest cities in the country. Like there's just something there about Lamar Jackson that as a fan makes me more passionate than when Joe Flacco was disrespected. Joe Flacco was a winner. You can't don't talk shit about Joe Flacco. Uh, but Lamar Jackson represents something bigger. He represents something greater, and it's injustice. And you just want him to clear that final hurdle, that final fuck you to everybody out there that doubted him, that said he needed to play wide receiver, that said his play was unsustainable, that said he's too turnover prone, that said he's too this, he just broke the record this year. Not broke the record, but like, well, I guess the only quarterback to ever throw for more than 40 touchdowns and less than 5 interceptions. You're talking about, oh, he didn't have the decision making ability. He can't read defenses, taking shots at his intellect because of his blackness, and in a different way than they would talk about Patrick Mahomes. This is the frustration. This is the inequality. This is the injustice that I just want it for him so bad. He'll be back. We'll be back next year. Don't worry. So all that being said, I also had some notes about the NFC divisional game in comparison to the AFC divisional game. Talk about Matthew Stafford for 5 seconds here. Matthew Stafford is going to receive absolutely no criticism for that game. Matthew Stafford was down, the Rams were down by less than a touchdown in the fourth quarter, and Matthew Stafford had three possessions. On the first possession, he fumbled the ball in his own red zone. Uh, Eagles score a touchdown, make it a two possession game. He does come back and score a touchdown on the next drive, so now they're down by one possession. And on that possession, he takes a costly sack on 3rd and 2. Might as well have just fumbled it because it takes them out of really out of contention. You just can't take the sack right there. And I'm not going to hear anybody out there critiquing or criticizing how bad Matthew Stafford played in the fourth quarter, but a fumble and a drive killing sack when you're down by one possession, uh, he's just not going to get the same level of scrutiny that Lamar got, even though he made the play to win the game. He made the play to he had his team in position to win, and then after his teammate fumbled, put him in position to tie with a 2 point conversion, and his teammate dropped the pass. Lamar played exceptional. Matthew Stafford, I gotta hang the loss on him, honestly. Kyron Williams had a costly fumble a little earlier, but Stafford had a chance, and Stafford ultimately made the mistakes in the fourth quarter. Nobody's gonna bring that up. I brought it up. All right, some final notes on the Orioles. Like Elias, now's your chance. Give us some solace. Give us some. You got a chance to console Baltimore sports fans here. Give us something. We need an ace. I heard a rumor that maybe the Diamondbacks would want to move on from Jordan Montgomery, who signed a big contract and then had a injury-plagued year last year. 2 years ago, he was the hero for the Rangers in the pursuit of the World Series. He kind of led that pitching staff. We were after him hard last year in the offseason to sign him. Go get him, Elias. We'll take Montgomery. We'll still take Cease. We'll still take Castillo. Go get us something. Our hearts are broken. We need somebody. And finally, a farewell to Anthony Santander. Uh, 5 year, $92 million contract. He's going to the Blue Jays. That sucks because now I have to hate him. But Santander was an incredible Oriole. He was a Rule 5 draft pick, and I like to explain those things in case you're not familiar. Rule 5 means he was not on a 40-man roster. He initially was part of the Cleveland Indians organization, and they didn't have him on the 40-man roster, so the Orioles took him. He had to play in the major leagues immediately. We couldn't put him in the minors, so he went straight to the major leagues, skipped, AAA and all that, and uh, kind of had a lot of growing pains. And ultimately, last year was an all star, Silver Slugger, and received votes for MVP. 44 home run year, great career year for Anthony Santander, but he's 30. I don't see him on an upward trajectory. Uh, 44 home runs was 11 more than any other year in his career. He got the deal he deserved or the deal he was looking for, around 5 years, $100 million is what I had been told all offseason. And honestly, I would pass. Great Oriole, great story. We love Anthony Santander. I would like to say good luck, but not really. Good luck as soon as the Blue Jays are out of contention. I hope you do well. Um, but it's time to make some room for all these Orioles outfielders. We've got Kowser and Kerstadt, and we still have Mullins under control for this season. After after that, we've got Bradfield and Honeycutt coming up, and Honeycutt seems to be a stud. Five tools, Bradfield seems to be exceptional stolen base. Like we're talking, actually, speaking of talking, I talked to Enrique Bradfield last year when he was in Asheville. There's actually a rule that they can't do interviews unless unless you're part of the media. But we had a conversation, and he told me, the dream is to be Ricky Henderson. Like he wants to steal as many bases as he possibly can. Like he's shooting, that's his goal in life. And man, if he can get on base enough, he doesn't have a lot of power, but he is a terror on the bases. He will steal. Uh, he could lead the major league in stealing. He could steal 60, 70 bases in a season. Like that type of, if he gets on base, he's got that type of stolen base potential. So we've got all these young outfielders, and then we went out and signed Tyler O'Neill, who last year, even though he played fewer games than Santander, he had like a 2.5 WAR, while Santander's WAR was 3.0. So in 40 fewer games, pretty similar WAR. Guy hit 30 plus home runs in 113 games last year. Uh, he has two gold gloves to his credit already. So you're looking at a guy that's a defensive upgrade over Santander. Could potentially hit just as many home runs as Santander, and is a right-handed bat, which is something the Orioles have needed really in the past two seasons. They've been way too left-hand dominant. So he adds some balance to the order. I don't think it's much production lost. He's a little bit cheaper. It's only a 3-year, $50 million contract. So over the life of the contract, we're committed to 40 million less dollars. And uh, for better, yeah, with I don't want to say it's exactly equal, but relatively so. We've replaced one player with a similar uh, quality player, and honestly, for me, it's all about Heston Kjerstad anyway. Remember, Heston Kjerstad was the number 2 draft pick in 2020, had to take a year off for myocarditis. He has tore through the minor leagues. Last year, I talked to him when I went to the game in Charlotte, and he had just come off of a 10 RBI game. That's one of the rarest feats in Major League Baseball. I don't know about minor league. It was in a minor league game, but in Major League Baseball, it's only happened about 15 times. And he had a 10 RBI game. This guy crushed the ball in the minor leagues and had some good at bats in the majors, just didn't get enough of them last year. So I'm ready to see Kjerstad be an everyday player for the Orioles, starting right field, and hopefully begin what will be a great career for him. So, again, farewell to Anthony Santander. Awesome career. Tony Taters, what a great nickname. Uh, Baltimore loves you. The Orioles love you. Thanks for the last few years. And with that, I'm going to bring things to a close. If you've got any thoughts about the podcast, please email me. The email's in the description. I'd love to answer your questions. I'd love to respond to your comments. Please like and subscribe on Spotify, and we're trying to get this up on YouTube as well. So uh, I appreciate the support. This is all just a project I do for fun because I love being part of the Baltimore sports community. So go O's, right? Let's turn the page on the Ravens season. Go O's.